Hi, my name is Kat, and this is my story of being trafficked in Detroit when I was a young teenager. As a teenager, I grew up in Downriver, Michigan, 20 minutes south of Detroit, and I grew up in a single parent home with my mom. She worked two jobs sometimes worked long hours at one job and wasn't home very often. So I didn't have a lot of family support. So I sought that sort of attention elsewhere. In school, I started running away and hanging out with the wrong crowd. And that sort of led me down the path that eventually led me to James, my trafficker. My mom sent me to live with my uncle when I was 11 or 12. My mom was a single parent, so she thought it would be a better situation for me to have more guidance and somebody present with me all the time. I showed horses and showed dogs and had so many experiences that I wouldn't have had at home with my mom. My cousin ended up getting pregnant around 15 years old, and they sort of flipped the blame on me, saying that I brought all the boys around. So they sent me back home to live with my mom. So I was taken away from the situation where I had support and people around me all the time to being home by myself. Not having somebody there was really difficult for me. I went back to school downriver, and school downriver is much different than school in the country. So I was exposed to more like kids that were doing like smoking or, doing like recreational drugs. I ended up in middle school. Well, I found under my mom's dresser, told my middle school counselor about it because I got in trouble and I ratted my mom out. My mom decided to send me to this like rehab facility called Caros Healthcare in Saginaw. But that was my first experience with men in power taking advantage of that power. Caros Healthcare had females and males. There were 2 bedrooms. There was like a closet between the rooms, and then the other side, there was the boys' room. But the counselor would pull the girls out one by one, sometimes like every night, every other night, and would pull us into the office and proposition us for oral sex in exchange for like cigarettes or whatever it is we wanted at the time. But that was the first time I felt like you can't really trust anybody. My mom sent me here to be safe, and I'm not safe. So I ended up going back home from rehab. I never told my mom about it. I didn't tell anybody about it because it's embarrassing and shameful, and I felt like I would get in trouble. I started skipping, started hanging out with people that I shouldn't have hung out with, and they eventually, because I was skipping so much, had to pull me out and put me in adult education. I was super young, and I think from the age of 11, men kind of like sexualized me. And I mean, all of my friends, we would ride our bike, and there was always like construction workers like whistling at you, or people whistling at you out of their car. And like we hadn't even hit puberty yet. Any sort of like male acceptance, for some reason, I was seeking. Like I just wanted to feel like accepted. I was riding my bike with my friend in my apartment complex, and there was a moving truck with 2 guys in it, and I was really attracted to black men at that time. These guys, they were movers, and they were like looking at us and like flirting with us, and I don't remember how old I was. I had to have been like probably 13. And they ended up exchanging numbers with us. Got his number. His name was Travis, and he started calling me and started to pick me up, or he would tell me, "Oh, catch the bus here and I'll pick you up downtown." So he would pick me up, take me to his house, we'd hang out, and eventually hanging out turned into like more physical things like kissing, second base, third base, like oral sex, and then eventually sex. And then one night I was over there, and there was a knock on the door, and it was this guy named Fame. That was like his nickname. He was like 6 something, like his head was just under the doorway. He walked in, and Travis had like TV. I quickly realized what was happening. Like they were talking and saying how, Fame like always wanted to meet me. Travis told him all about me. Like they both ended up having sex with me in the living room on the floor in front of the TV. I remember how like big Fame was. Like he was huge, like a huge man, and I was very small. And But I think that was the first time I realized when you have like a biological reaction, like my body almost shut down. So I remember going home after that, and that was when I think I felt kind of tainted. So I didn't tell anybody about it because I'm a kid. What am I doing in Detroit with this guy that's in his 20s? The running away started more after that. Like, I started to get on the bus. I would go into Detroit, get off on Grand River, and just like hang out. I ended up meeting this girl named Veronica, but she took me to her house. So we met and would hang out. I had nowhere to stay because I was a runaway. So she said, oh, why don't you just stay out here tonight? Like, it was cold. The bus line ended at like 10, I believe, at that time. We went up in the house and I stayed the night. Slept in the bed with them. Like, nothing weird happened. We just like slept together. By this time, I had made friends like in the neighborhood who I thought were friends. They were all men in their late 20s, so they were not my friends. They were telling me like, oh, this guy, like James, he's looking for you. Like, he really wants to talk to you. And I was like, why does he want to talk to me? Oh, like, he's cool. Just, next time, well, I'll let him know you were here, whatever. Like, they were sort of like, seemed like they were trying to figure out where I was going to be. I ended up going to Coney Island, and I never had money. So I would go to Coney Island and be like, oh, can I get chili cheese fries, whatever. You like kind of develop a rapport with like the liquor store, Coney Island, like the little shops you go to all the time. And they would like hook me up. If I had a couple dollars, they would just give it to me. So I went in and asked for chili fries, and James, I didn't know at the time, but James walked into Coney Island. He was like, hey, are you Kat? And I was like, yeah. And he introduced himself, and he was very nice. He paid for my chili fries. And there was nothing about him that was like off-putting. There were no red flags that went up for me. My gut didn't tell me to run away. And he was like, why don't you come with me? Like, you can stay with me. I have a few other girls that are staying with me. I'll take care of you. I'll buy you food, clothes. I didn't want to go home at this point because I think I had been gone at that time for like a week. So I didn't want to go home and get in trouble. So he took me to the house. There were like girls in the house. So they were all white and all young, like under 18. He took me in the house. Everything was fine. Everybody was nice, welcoming. It was like oddly comfortable. He took me to the store. I bought clothes. It was like a beauty supply, like a little store that had like really terrible clothes. There was like an upstairs to this house that we were in. We were going up the stairs and he stopped me. And I remember I was wearing like a denim jumper, and I don't know how he got it undone or pulled my shorts to the side or what happened. I just remember him saying that if you're going to work for me, like, I have to test you out. And I was like, what do you mean work for you? And he was like, do you think everything I did for you is like free? You have to pay me back for this. And I was like, what do you mean? Nobody does stuff like this for free. And I was just like, well, you can have everything back. And he was like, yeah, it doesn't work that way. So essentially that was the first time that he had sex with me, and it was on this like stairway going upstairs, and it was very fast, and I don't think there was much time to think. I just remember like sweat hitting me, and I did the disassociation thing again. After that, he started easing me into going out and doing calls. So this was like a cycle. So I would observe the cycle. There would be a new girl that he would bring over. Everybody had to act like they were happy. So I just sort of went along with what everybody that had been there for a long time would do. And I remember feeling like guilty, or like I was being deceptive towards the girls that were coming in, because I didn't want them to have to do what I did. So new girls would come in, and then like me, like he would have sex with them, and then the cycle started. So he would there was him and like 3 other guys that we would see. The reason we would have to stay in the house in between going to calls, somebody would be circling the block all day long. So if you went outside to take a walk, they would pull up and say, hey, where are you going? And we'd be like, oh, we're going to the store. No, you're not going to the store. Go back inside the house. So we went back in the house. So there was no going out or like exploring, because he always had people watching the house. So when he would take us to calls, there were multiple hotels. I remember one was the Knights Inn, one was Red Roof Inn. Like all of these hotels were on pretty busy roads, like right by a freeway. And he would take us, we would all be in like one room hanging out, and then there would be another room for calls. And we would get calls, and whoever got the call would go in the room. They would handle however long it would be. And then they'd come back in the room, shower, and it would just like keep going on. I had this like bleeding disorder. If I wasn't on this certain birth control pill, I would like bleed and like hemorrhage. So I had to be on this birth control, and I had run out of my birth control. So I was bleeding all the time. I think it was my first alcohol, like first like full alcohol. He was like, "You're gonna get your prescription after this call." So he like took me to the room. I went in. There's an Asian guy in there. I was bleeding. He gave me the prescription after. And so he was a doctor, and he just had sex with me like on a bed in a hotel in a city that I'm not familiar with, and then handed me a prescription. Doctors are off limits. Teachers are off limits. Like cops are off limits. Like those people don't do those things. Those people, again, are people in power that are supposed to protect you. There was a Red Roof Inn on Telegraph that we would go to often to do like in calls, and I was in this room with Camille again. We were always kind of like close together. I really wish I knew where she was. And I remember going downstairs to the vending machine or something. I saw like a family outside, and there was this like a dad and his wife and like their kids or whatever. And he was just like, "Oh, hey, how are you? Like, what are you doing here? You guys on vacation?" Like, it was just small talk, and I was talking back, and I felt like normal for a minute. I went upstairs and I opened the hotel door with the key. Open the door, walk in, and Camille's like looking at me, warning me with her eyes, but like not saying anything. And then James comes out from the side of the door. I didn't see him, but he was behind the door, and he just like punched me in my face as hard as he could, and I fell on the floor. And he was like, "Yeah, don't ever do that again. Don't talk to anybody again." I just continued doing that for I don't know how long. I don't remember, until one night I remember I was with this guy, and he like had peed on me during our interaction. The call was at his house. So I was at his house. We were like in the middle of a sexual act, and he took me in the bathroom. And I remember he put me in the bathtub, and that's when he peed on me. But he didn't like warn me. It just happened. And then after that call, he rinsed me off in the shower, and I got dressed and we left to go back. So when you do any calls like that, there's no sort of like dialogue, there's no conversation. So I was at this was an out call. He was dropping me off for some reason, which was rare so I don't know if they knew him or he was like a friend, because there's no way they would have let just a regular guy off the street drop me off. He dropped me off, and I saw a blue Sunfire on the street with the interior light on. I was like, "Is that my mom?" And she like turns around and sees me. She was like, "Katherine, get the in the car right now." She pulled me in the car, and I think I was just in disbelief because I was like, my hair was still like damp and what had just happened, obviously. And then my mom picking me up, and she has all these questions, and she's like, "We're going to the police station right now." I just remember going in, and I was like, this is it. He's gonna get caught. All these girls are gonna go home. And we walked in, and the cops were like so nonchalant and annoyed because I guess my mom had been like looking for me. Like every police station in Detroit, she was like bugging them. Why aren't you looking for her? Because nobody was like helping her or doing anything. This female officer took me out back and gave me a cigarette, and I was smoking and talking to her like nothing happened. She wasn't asking me about what happened, and the cops were just like, "I don't like, you need to just leave it alone. Like, just don't go over there. Like, it's dangerous. It's not safe." And she's like, "Why don't you guys go over there?" Like, she's telling you that there's a house full of girls and this older man, and like, what's going on? Why isn't anybody going over there? "Well, it doesn't work like that, ma'am." And I knew the scale of everything. I knew where the hotels were. I knew like the system. Like, they didn't even ask. I remember going home, and I was angry with my mom. For some reason, I don't know why. Maybe because she didn't rescue me sooner. People say, "Oh, you were working, you were a prostitute, you did this." Like, if that's not trafficking, it is trafficking. Like, I was a teenager. I was not working because I was not of age to consent to work. Like, I wasn't doing it because I wanted to do it. I was doing it because I was forced to do it. I don't know why we didn't try harder to like not go back I think because we're in the same neighborhood and I always felt like everybody was watching me. He knew where I lived. I knew that. I don't know how he knew where I lived. I just like wonder, like, why did I just get on a bus and go home? Or like, I don't know. I think about things I could have done differently, I guess. And once I was home, I never heard from like James again. My mom got rid of my phone right away, so I had no access to that, and he couldn't access me. Luckily, he never came looking for me, but unfortunately, that just kind of means there's like an endless stream of girls that are looking for a father figure, and he's just filling up the house again, you know? And I like Googled his name. I just typed in Sweet James Detroit. And I don't know why, but immediately in Google Images, like his face popped up. It was the first thing that was on like the little image bar. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I was expecting to see his face. So I like click on it and it said trafficking kingpin gets 14 to 40 years for, I think it was trafficking or whatever it said in the headline. So I think while I was like happy that he was in prison, a part of me was a little disappointed because I knew what he had done to the girls that were with me at the time, and he didn't answer for those things, you know? The turning point for me was the birth of my third child. I wanted an unmedicated birth with her. I had medicated births with my first two, and everything was very it was very like, just have the baby, put it on the warmer. It wasn't like skin to skin and like everything they do now, because it was like 2004 or 2005. And I wanted to make the decision. So I went to this doctor in Newport Beach, and he had already tried stripping my membranes. So this was the moment that I was like, women who have been sexually assaulted or have trauma are not considered in gynecological care. So the process of getting my membrane stripped was traumatic for me. I wasn't told that it was going to hurt or how it was going to feel. It just kind of happened, and I felt very like... So this appointment, I went in, the membrane stripping didn't work. So he was like, I'm going to strip your membranes again. I'm on the table, my legs are open, my husband's in there, and he's like doing an exam, and I remember his hand was like this, and he went super deep inside, and I felt like a jerking motion, but it was super painful, and I felt a release. So he actually like was stripping my membranes, but broke my water and pretended like it was an accident. And I knew it wasn't an accident because of like the look he gave me after. So he like was kind of like, oh, looks like you're going into the L&D like today. Like he was doing me a favor. Like it was like 10 in the morning, super convenient for him, I'm sure. I was already dilated. So I went to the hospital when my labor was super short. It was like 2 hours, very intense, no medication. And I remember laying on my back in a prone position. My legs are open, and there's like students in the room. And I just remember like feeling like all this stuff is going on around me, and nobody was like, are you okay? Like, do you need anything? And I was feeling very exposed. My daughter was crowning, and I was feeling everything, and I had never felt everything before because I was numb. So the nurse comes in and she's like, well, the doctor's still 10 minutes away. Like, you have to stop pushing. And I'm like, I'm not pushing. Like, she's coming out on her own. And the nurse put her hand inside me and held her head back, like was like holding her back. Yeah. And I remember just like screaming because the pressure at that point from like my body was just like expelling her. I wasn't even pushing, was so intense. And I just kept saying I felt like I was dying. I just wanted someone to come and like tell me I was going to be okay. So I think that's when I learned this is how I'm going to get through it, is just talking about it and being vocal and like advocating for women that may not be at that point yet. So I'm hoping that my story, like parents can see it and be like, oh, well, maybe I didn't look at it this way. Maybe she's struggling because of this, or maybe she's holding anger inside because of that. And I want to get in there and talk to her and give her a hug listen, just listen and be there and spend time with them, even if they act like they don't want you to.